2 or 3 decades ago the issue of fifth-generation fighters was monopolized by the United States. In 1990s, they launched an F-22 program, followed by the next decade's even more ambitious and large-scale F-35 development program. Raptor soon acquired the public image of fifth-generation gold standard fighter. Stealth capabilities, non-augmented supersonic cruising speed, improved flexibility, these were specific requirements set by the USAF for designing an air superiority fighter. But people's view of the fifth-generation fighter had been successfully formed. The appearance of F-35 broke the mold. Too many features didn't meet the expectations. Its stealth capabilities were less impressive than those of F-22. The cruising supersonic can be achieved at relatively low speeds and for a short time, though it might be incapable of it at all. F-35's maneuverability is definitely worse as compared to Raptor. And where's its thrust vector? As the saying goes, your expectations are your own problem. F-35 was assigned quite a different mission, that's why the set of requirements was different. But this didn't interfere with all the polemic of Lightning not fitting the fictional standards. Following the USA, Russia dashed into the unofficial pursuit of the fifth-generation fighters. D-50, later referred to as Su-57, was developed as a versatile fighter designed both to gain air superiority, strike ground targets and surface ships. Nominally it can be considered a response to the US Raptor. It is the aircraft Russian Su-57 is often compared to. It isn't in service yet, but it has received its portion of criticism. Its insufficient stealth capabilities and the absence of specially designed engine are most often discussed. Its avionics was also subject to criticism. Yet there is a sensible view that Su-57 may become an effective formidable weapon. The previous Sukhoi DB long-term experience lends evidence to this. In general, the USA and Russia, preceded by the USSR, are acknowledged leaders in military aircraft engineering. It's no wonder that they were the first to launch their fifth-generation fighter development programs. But how big was the world's aeronautical public's surprise to see China chasing the leaders in the pursuit? The experts, renowned veterans and active-duty journalists' resentment knew no limits. The overall tone was, how dare they? All time they had been purchasing Soviet and Russian weaponry and copying it on their factories, and now look at them attempting to reach the top of the hill. Do they really believe it will fly? They have just copied the composition of American, Soviet and Russian fighters, put together ridiculous aircraft, and they are hoping it will work. But after 10 years the overall tune changed from pejorative to not yet approving and favorable, but moderate and respectful. The time proved that China was not bluffing and was really developing the project. There is a little data available at the moment. Practically all the information is highly classified. Now and then they are informing the society of their success. This is Chengdu J-20. This is Angels of the Sky channel. Subscribe us. Historically the Chinese Air Force were greatly dependent on the Soviets, and later on the Russian Federation. As the 21st century arrived, the situation hasn't changed greatly. Suffice to look at the Chinese fourth-generation fleet in service today. There is a total of 700 aircraft available, and most of them are derivatives of the famous Su-27. Part of the fleet was purchased from Russia directly. The fleet amounting to 100 craft includes Su-30 MKK, Su-35. The remaining greater amount was manufactured at the local facilities, including those with homemade avionics. Shenyang J-11 is a licensed copy of Su-27 SK. And the relatively new J-16 is a heavy upgrade of Su-30. The Navy also has about 50 carrier-borne J-15s, derivatives of the Soviet Su-33. The rest of the Chinese Air Force fourth-generation fighters are Chengdu J-10s. In China this aircraft is described as an original solution, but experts say Israeli specialists also had their fingers in the pie at the early stage of the project development. In the mid-1980s, Israel was actively developing their multi-purpose Lavi fighter. However, the project was soon shut down under the influence of the USA. It is believed that engineering documentation was given to the Chinese in a while, and that Israeli specialists took part in developing J-10. They say Russian designers also took part. Anyway, J-10 development propelled the Chinese aircraft engineering industry to the next level, which meant that with time they could try and take on more ambitious tasks. For example, creating a brand new fighter of the fifth generation according to the Western aircraft classification. There was an opinion that China wouldn't invent anything new, and would use either J-10 or its solutions as a prototype. Time shows, this forecast was true to life to some extent. By the end of 2010, first photos of the Chinese fighter were published, and January saw the video of its flights. The second prototype took off in a year, and the flight test's active stage started. And hobbyist aviators started an equally absorbing guessing game of whatever the Chinese aircraft designers had built. It became clear from a poor set of photos and videos that the prospective J-20 had a delta canard configuration with the forward-looking all-moving fins. The scheme is similar to that of J-10, and Chengdu specialists use the proven scheme, but this was the only common feature. The prototype was powered by 2 engines instead of 1, and the airframe had a low observable shape. Improving its stealth capabilities must have been the key requirement. In no time, compositions and solutions, already employed by other countries' fighters, appeared. Aircraft's nose with a frameless canopy and armament bays arrangement were similar to those of F-22. Air intakes of the type were used on F-35, and the 2 all-movable tail fins resembled the ones on the Russian T-50. The top of the popular concept that the Chinese had copied everything was the assumption of the aircraft being the starting point for the Chinese Black Dragon. This was pretty easy. It was unquestionably the Soviet-Russian MiG 1.44, the experimental fighter model, built in a single copy. One can see it at the International Aviation and Space Show. The canard configuration, a large area delta wing, 2 closely mounted engines and 2 spaced-apart ventral strake fins. Here's a ready-made J-20 prototype for you. The problem seems to be solved. But it's not as simple as it appears to be. The desire to call J-20 a mixture of F-22 and MiG 1.44 can be understood. But the point is, should we accept it as a fact, or should we probe deeper? MiG 1.44 is the ancestry of 1980s. The US and the Soviet Union had already begun developing the new generation fighters' conceptual designs which were supposed to replace fourth-generation fighters. By the decade's start, the USAF had already formulated a set of requirements for the prospective fighter. Chiefly, it was expected to demonstrate high cruising speeds and flexibility. That's why it's no surprise that most of the drafted projects performed by the aircraft manufacturers implied the use of canard configuration. These were the ones that met the military contractors' requirements. The results of the experimental projects like Heimat proved that such aircraft could demonstrate unprecedented flexibility at great speed ranges. Fifth-generation fighters would look something like this had the unique Lockheed F-117 not been designed. The low observability feature captured the minds of American defense officials. They rightfully deemed that later acquisition and radar displaying improved aircraft's survivability and enhanced its tactical performance. The results wasted little time. The requirements to the prospective fighter were reviewed, booths were soon forgotten, and the resulting aircraft were quite different. The final tests were taken by the YF-22 and YF-23 prototypes. Thus, in the USA, the issue of low observability prevailed over the ideas of flexibility and higher speeds. It was right on the contrary in the Soviet Union, and MiG 1.44 embodied the ideas. Its history, though, remained short and inglorious. So, if Chengdu engineers did use this Soviet-Russian fighter as a basis, they would have built a super-maneuverable and fast-moving fighter. Why else would they do that? But upon a closer view of the J-20 prototype, its conceptual resemblance with American fifth-generation fighters becomes apparent, though externally it looks much the same as MiG 1.44. The Chinese craft had a clear-cut lifting body integrated concept, which the Russian prototype lacked. It's obviously built with a view of stealth features. Its airframe had a low observability shape, and all the armament was carried in integral weapon bays. MiG 1.44 could hardly have been called low observable. The airframe shape and the absence of inner bays are the evidence to it. The two aircraft resemble each other due to the delta wing and two spaced-apart ventral strake fins, but J-20 had all moving fins, and they are mounted with an outward flaring, whereas the presence of fins proves the fact that the proper stability and side slip at supersonic speeds couldn't be obtained by the use of vertical fins with a relatively small area. The two aircraft also differ in terms of the air intakes. The MiG 1.44 intakes are under the fuselage, and they are variable. J-20's intakes are side-mounted, and they lack inner-movable control parts. These are the so-called DSI intakes. The design was first tested on experimental F-16 model in mid-1990s. The results seemed promising, and in a while they were used on F-35. What is the difference? Conventional supersonic intakes have slots for boundary layer bleed, whereas in case of DSI intakes the turbulent air layer is turned using the arched ramp and the shockwave pattern, generated by the intake edge. This is the best option for a low observable airplane, though the payoff is maximum speed limitation. Most probably it wouldn't be over Mach 2. Meanwhile, J-20 has the canard structure, which, along with tailless configuration, is the best choice for ultra-high speeds. There are lots of these aircraft, ranging from bombers to reconnaissance and even passenger planes. All of them had narrow delta small aspect ratio wings, characterized by a relatively low drag coefficient at supersonic speeds. Also, the canard configuration qualitatively has a great advantage over the tailless scheme. The horizontal canard creating lift substantially reduces loss by longitudinal balance. The descending vortexes can greatly enhance the wing's lift. And J-20 has gloved wings. The more so, as no official news were received from the manufacturers. But soon the Western countries were astonished by the pace of developments. In March 2014 a new 2011 prototype took off. During the following 3 months 3 more aircraft hit the skies, and a year later, 2 extra craft of the same kind were added to flight testing. Such pace was unexpected. For example, it took the US designer 7 years to move from flight tests of YF-22 to the pre-production F-22 maiden flight. It took another 7 years to make them operational. But in China the first production standard J-20 was accepted for service with the Air Force in 2016. The following year domestic mass media reported that J-20s had become operational, and what is more, the press started to discuss the J-20 production plans. Reportedly, during the first 3 to 5 years, Chengdu was supposed to deliver under 20 aircraft a year, and afterwards, with 3 more assembly lines, they would produce 36 birds per year. Thus, by the end of 2021, there would be over 100 production standard J-20s. According to different estimates, 50 to 75 fighters are already operational at bases. And now for the disillusionment. The breathtaking pace of the aircraft maturation and making them operational are really impressive, but does it really go so smoothly? As the proverb goes, we might say that there's surely turd in this Chinese punch bowl, and the point is that the engines are the weak spot. Nearly all production standard J-20s are powered by Russian turbojet engines, AL-31FN or FN2 derivatives. All others have 2 domestically manufactured WS-10s. Engine issues are a serious problem for Chinese aircraft industry, and during the last 2 decades they've been investing much in the field in order to draw closer to the world's leaders to some extent, and to stop relying on Russian engines. Some 10 to 15 years ago the situation was really sad. Domestic power plant service life was only several dozens of hours, but they say China's made great progress since then. It goes without saying that it cannot compete equally. The world's leading engine manufacturers, based in America, Europe, and Russia, had been continuously working on the problem. But China apparently is already capable of producing engines, having the same performance as the ones powering 4th-generation fighters back in 1980 to 1990s. Production standard J-20 are no longer powered by Russian AL-31F, and they are planning to install the most powerful WS-10 modification, boasting an augmented thrust of 14.5 tons. Probably some of the craft would be fitted with a thrust vectoring nozzle. Now it's being tested on experimental aircraft, and J-10 has demonstrated its current capabilities at a recent air show. But the Chinese have been waiting for another engine, WS-15. It is this engine that'll allow J-20s to showcase its performance. It will reportedly possess 16 to 18 tons thrust, but what's more important is the thrust it can provide without afterburners. In case of planned 10 to 11 tons, it would be sufficient for a supersonic cruising flight at Mach 1.5 and even higher. There is no data on the speed characteristics with the current engines. According to optimistic forecasts, WS-15s will power production standard aircraft by 2025. And what about its firepower? 3 integrated bays will house the weapons, 2 on the sides and 1 in the center. The arrangement is similar to that of Raptor, but with a few differences. Up to 4 medium and beyond visual range arms can be housed in the main bay. Both are active homing missiles. PL-12 and PL-15 are the basic Chinese fighter's caliber. The same goes with the AIM-120 MRAM in case of F-22. There are 2 highly maneuverable heat-seeking PL-10 rams, used for close-quarter aerial combat. They are placed in lateral bays one by one. And here the Chinese engineers used an innovative solution. Before launch, the missile is propelled into the streamline using a particular guideway, and the missile bay door is closed, which is an aerodynamic advantage when the aircraft is maneuvering intensively. Besides, the missile will be able to home in on the target before launch, which will allow it to use the energy more efficiently. We might as well say some words about the J-20's cannon, but there are no cannons installed, and this speaks volumes as far as the bird's tactical application is concerned. J-20's avionics is a sealed book as well. But its composition denotes the striving to enhance situational awareness and combat efficiency of the aircraft. J-20 is equipped with an active phased antenna array radar with an extra side-looking radar. The fighter is also equipped with an electron-optical all-round observation surveillance system. It allows to track air and ground targets and missile launches, and it also provides for the night vision capabilities. Combat effectiveness is greatly improved by the electro-optical targeting system in the aircraft's nose. As with regards to avionics, J-20 is up there with F-35, the most advanced American aircraft nowadays. And in case its performances are the same or nearly the same, it'll become a truly powerful combat aircraft system. January 2021 will mark Chengdu J-20's 10 years of flight experience. During these 10 years the fighter development program made its way from 2 crude prototypes to several dozens of production standard craft. And not only the quantity but also the quality of the fighter development is surprising, at least at a glance. Visually they are up there with the American fighters. There is still little credible information concerning the aircraft. China is keeping all J-20 related data highly classified, but it's still possible to discuss its tactical application. This low and observable long-range airborne system is designed to patrol and intercept aerial targets in non-augmented